Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Clinic Gym Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Satterlee, and I'm joined today by Dr. Charlie Weingroff, who might be the most pioneering man in all of the blend of clinic and gym I've ever met. Charlie, how are you?
What's up, man? I'm a pioneer, huh?
Yep. You know what they say, you can always tell the pioneers because they've got arrows sticking out of them.
What's that? My line for that is a little bit more arrogant. It is, hey, you can do what you want to do, but you know what? When you look up, you're going to see the back of my jersey, and it's going to say Weingroff because I'm way out ahead of you. At that point, you can then shoot as many arrows as you want because I got a really big back.
There you go. Well, Charlie, you've been in the game quite a bit, and for those who don't know, a while back, I don't even remember the first year you released it, but you have the Training Equals Rehab. I call it an ecosystem, but you've built a series of educational products. When was the first one released?
Released in early part of 10. It was filmed in, I want to think, October or November of 09.
Okay.
Whatever it was, the information was from 09. Okay. It was because at that time, Equinox, which is a big gym, very high-end brand, they were cultivating a top-tier group of their trainers. They called it Tier 4 at that time. And Geraldine Coopersmith, who has bounced around with very, very high-profile positions in fitness, was in charge of this at that time. And she asked if I was able to deliver something that bridged the gap between personal training and physical therapy. That was the terms. And that's actually on the first slide. Now, I've come to despise bridge the gap. There's some horrible, horrible human beings that use that term, and I don't want anything to do with them. So I don't bridge the gap. I don't think there is a gap. And that was really what I even went back to in 09. There is no gap. It's just one thing. And people just have different expertise in order to affect that thing, which is the human system. So the first DVD, I guess every year that goes by, there's less and less that I would currently agree with, but all the concepts have never, ever changed. So I think, again, I was working on the PowerPoint probably January, February 09. And then the first time we ever did it was in Palo Alto, which was for the Equinox group there. I don't remember if the second one was New York or California or LA, but New York was the one that, so like that's all like live, like there was nothing rehearsed. It wasn't like, okay, hold on, we have to go do that one over again. It was just a camera dude following me around. At that time as well, I think it was the first. Obviously now these things aren't really part of our market, for learning. DVDs, like what is that? At that time, it was the first one filmed in 4K, and I think it was the first that had 3 cameras. And all I did was take the money that I made from Equinox and just put it into that and gave it a ride. So it's old. It's old now.
Yeah. Well, this is back too when you couldn't film it with your cell phone. I mean, now you can get away with so much, just somebody holding your cell phone, the image is so great. And then you actually had to hire a crew with cameras and whatnot.
With cell phones. Yeah. We actually, we filmed something recently up in Connecticut, and I paid extra, which wound up meaning I'd be less work down the road because I don't do the editing. I've never even watched any of my stuff. I can't do that. I can't sit there and watch. It edited while it was filming.
Wow.
So like as soon as they were done, like it was ready to market. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So that's cool.
That's crazy. Well, so that was back in 09, let's say 10. So it's at least 10 years old. And you kind of progressed from, you said your principles and your concepts have not changed, but the actual tactics have revised where necessary. And recently I saw that you put out one all about ACL rehab.
Yeah. That was on my list to do for a very, very long time. And it began with my friend. His name is Vince Gabriel, very, very successful gym owner in northern
Yeah,
New
he has a great
Jersey.
podcast and has a great gym. Listen to his work quite a bit.
Now he would, part of his success, is a little bit of taking advantage of some good things. So now Vince was a Division I athlete, a very, very high level athlete that came out of where he currently lives. So he already had some shine. So now here's this great athlete that everybody knows played football, and now he's opening a gym. So there's a level of marketing credibility that you can't really buy.
Right.
Everybody knows him. Everybody likes the family, blah, blah, blah. So he was doing very, very well in terms of acquiring high school athletic, development crowd. It wasn't just people. He was doing very well. And with that, he started to see a lot of primarily young girls that had ACL issue. And he would call me and be like, dude, like, what am I? They're not ready to be training. They're all like rehab. So then usually I would see them once a month as a physical therapist and then tell them, where to go. And he had a massage therapist in his gym at that time. And I would have no problem with a competent massage therapist, not only competent with their hands, but also competent in not being a cowboy. You want to call me a pioneer? I'm not interested in cowboys. Where this is what you should do, and not anything else. Now I can't, like, after that I'm back off, and I'm not saying it and like you need to do what I tell you. I'm not involved in that, but Vince could handle that. So this is what I would do from a manual therapy standpoint, and this is what I would do for training. And it wound up being a lot of girls, and they were doing very, very well, because part of the concepts that we talk about from even 2010 that have not changed is I don't think just because someone had a surgery doesn't mean that the only person on earth is this man or woman that had gone to physical therapy school. Like, I don't believe that. Like, information is not exclusive to the letters that you put after your name. Your experience is what is. So if I teach someone else to be a technician and be like, do this and don't do this, especially when the person is not going to work with me, because even at that time, 2012, whatever it was, I started to, be all over the place. I wasn't seeing people in the in this, I'm not available. Like just today, I told, no, I need to see you two to three times a week. Like, well, that'd be great, except that's not available. Like, it's not even a money thing. It's not
just an impossibility.
Yeah, it's not how I work. There are times of the year, like we talked offline, where I do work, and it's been so exciting to be able to, work, 4 or 5 days a week, just training people. But getting back to that situation with Vince, these people are doing so well, and also because it does lend, the ACL Collective does lend to this. There's not a lot of need for, especially if you get out of the gate the proper way, and it's a suitable surgery, which doesn't always happen even with the best surgeons. I mean, a high training age person may not require any therapy. Like, if we're going to say therapy is what someone does to you and rehab is what you do for yourself, I could spend an hour with somebody and like once a month and be like, you're good. Like, depending on where depend, in different situations, but that's not it's not a ludicrous, commentary.
No.
So Vince was able to turn that into the local physicians recognizing it. And he began to, now, I don't know how much of your listeners are on the training side, but, of course, they get all mad that, how come doctor doesn't refer to me? Well, here's a situation where Vince was getting referrals from physicians, orthopedic surgeons, because when these kids came back, he's like, where'd you go? Where'd you get your therapy? No, I didn't go to therapy. I went to Gabriel Fitness. And he started to send people there. and Vince then continued to buckle up. And at that time, he and I became close friends. But he initially, Charlie, what would it cost to do this? Done. Like he was. I mean, that's his lesson, to pay for things that can help your business.
Right.
It has evolved, from to other things. Where now I'm like, I'm a brother, with the three sisters, mm-hmm. But we then took that ACL project, and then turned it into like a working document, which also had physical return to play, which we'll talk about, I think, later on when you have the more poignant questions. And he basically became like an emissary of what I would do. And he'll and this isn't about ego or anything. He's like, I'm more complimentary to him. Like he had to execute all this stuff, and you can't be afraid of somebody whose knee that hurts. Because with an ACL, it shouldn't really hurt. If you do this, you can unhurt it and then do your exercise if you need.
Well, I think it's great that he recognized a market that was in need instead of just going after the standard, 40-year-old soccer mom that fills up fitness studios. Yeah. And I mean, I think it's a win all around, because the other thing is that those, in a lot of those cases, especially adolescent females, if they don't get muscled up at that point, it may never happen. Post-surgical, they may just dive down and never achieve any sort of athleticism.
You're absolutely right. And there's now I can say that some of the most fun situations that I have ever been involved in my professional career, during the brief periods of time where I have worked a 9 to 5, which would be from 07 to 09, I think. Those girls. But we had a nice little mousetrap in New Jersey where I worked for a hospital, so they were able to kind of market what I do, but charge physical therapy, and it was totally above board and legal, etc. It's like injury prevention, which is clearly a billable and ethical thing for all allied health professionals, and it's so like those. The only time these girls would ever get an opportunity to get exposed to things is through this. Now, and believe it or not, one in particular that I know, she's not hard to find, in her comments about me in social media. Caitlin went on to, I'm not sure she's, I think at a certain point she had U.S. records in powerlifting in a different federation than where I would have competed in. But more importantly, she's in the process of getting her PhD in physical fitness. And her mom, and she's become like a sister to me over the years, certainly not while I was her therapist. And her mom, this is all your fault. This is the only reason she's into powerlifting is because of you. And she's one of the examples where she never would have found this path if she hadn't torn her ACL. And there was other girls that were just, they would destroy the boys, especially pull-ups because of the relative body weight piece. But for when the boys would come in and watch what the girls were doing, because they would be able to come in because they weren't practicing. So they would come in early, and then by the time they finished, then the second wave of kids would come in after practice. And or the adults coming in after work, and they were just, I mean, I could tell you. Now, there's things that I did with them that I wouldn't do. It was probably too aggressive, but there was never an issue. But, I mean, Caitlin, for instance, I remember her, probably weighing 105 pounds and deadlifting 225 sumo. I remember another young girl who, I don't know what technically you want to call it. So we're doing a single leg squat with your leg hanging off the side of the box. So you don't really have to manage it. And she had 17 and a half in each hand, ass to grass. And she had a meniscal repair and ACL. I mean, that is no joke for any person to be doing, much less a young girl, 16, 15 years old that weighs, 110 pounds soaking wet. I remember a girl, she went to Brown or Cornell, rear foot elevated split squats with 55s in each hand. and she wasn't, she probably weighed more than 110 pounds, but she wasn't like the bottom of the cheerleading. Like she still, she wasn't that heavy. There's some really cool things that we saw there. Now,
I think an exciting thing too is, again, at that moment, especially if they're maybe they're looking at a scholarship offer or something like that, and this injury has set back everything in their life, the empowerment piece, the psychological piece of grabbing some heavy ass weight and moving it, that spills out so far off the lifting platform and out of the gym into every aspect of their life. It's amazing.
Yeah. No, it's all true. A lot of it, unfortunately, is cliche, but it shouldn't be, because we all find something that somebody maybe provided for us. Now, I want to get back to Vince as well. During that period of time where I was helping him, and he was very impressively acquiring these referrals, which is really unheard of.
I'm sure there were physical therapy clinics that were just going, their mind was being blown. Like, how is this happening to us?
Yeah,
I mean, we're melting down.
Exactly. And like it furthered his relationship with these surgeons for all types of things, because then he would invite the surgeon to come do a talk. I mean, there was just so many angles. Now, the other thing, though, it was thrust upon him to a degree, because as we all know, insurance runs out. Insurance doesn't care if you do the protocol. They don't care. They're like, if you can wipe your bottom and go up and down the stairs, you're cut off. So or you've got these clown surgeons that have, like, oh, you're good. Like, this is ludicrous. So where do you go? Well, whether they're reacting to the insurance running out, or they're reacting to just what probably equates to, in my mind, negligence and malpractice, which is a complete ignorance to the difference between medically cleared and return to play, and everything in between, which there's a lot, which we'll get into. But where do you go? Well, you're not good enough for your sport yet, so you go to the gym. So those weren't necessarily direct referrals, but like, Josh had an ACL and he's doing awesome, and he went to Vince Gabriel, so I need to go to a gym, so I'm going to go there too. And it really just set him off, because as you also know, because I know there's a business component to what we're talking about on this podcast. Kids have parents. Parents can also train. Now, I don't know the conversion but I know Vince is really doing well, and that was one of probably a few projects that really hit. And then a couple years later, because I had it all written down, and I probably talked about it on a podcast or something, and I started to get other trainers be like, hey, listen, what would it cost if I come to the city and it's like 2 hours, 2.5 hours, whatever and then you show me all the stuff that you're doing, with ACL, because I think I'm in the same situation. And I'm like, I told one person, his name was Ryan, and I said, here's the price. Now you'll see, like, it's not cheap, because the reason it's less than what you think is because you're going to allow me to use this as to make a product. Like, you're not gonna get mad that I charged you full price and then I just took it and then flipped it to a whole bunch of other people. He's like, yeah, that's fine. Like, but I felt it was ethical to say, like, that was my intent, and also to explain why it was probably less expensive than he thought it was going to be, which he wasn't upset about. So
right.
he that was still a couple of years, but I always had it, and then we finally filmed it, and I'm actually glad, because if you take V1 from, I'm gonna guess 2012 or whatever, with Vince, versus what got Final Cut of ACL in action, it just grows. It's just bigger. It's badder. It's like there's more stuff and more concepts that weren't even a part of the first piece, the first version.
Yeah. What I think is exciting too is it wasn't what can Charlie do with rehab. It was what can I don't want to devalue Vince's skill set, but what can a trainer do with what Charlie has directed that's still effective? It's gone through that filter of a little game of telephone, and yet it's still wildly effective.
Yeah.
It doesn't require the hawk supervision all the time. It's like, hey, just have them do this stuff. And, most of the time they do very well.
Yeah. I'm not sure every sports or orthopedic post-surgical situation can lend to this, but most of them can if you have the right people. And I think the word that I would use is not the trainer and the therapist, but it's just a model. Like, this is a model. It's a system.
Right.
A model and a system are, in my mind, two different things. But in this case, they both apply, where you're going to apply a plan. Do you know how to bang a hammer? Yes. Are you hammer certified? No. Hold on a second. Let me see you bang a hammer. All right, go ahead. It doesn't matter, especially when it becomes more practical. Now, look, you have to navigate, legal concerns, and you can't present yourself as something that you're not. But remember, too, these are young. At that time, these were young people. They're not. It's not like a 14-year-old girl is coming into my office without their parent. We're explaining. It's like, in my opinion, and because you're an hour and 10 minutes away, obviously there's other logistics in terms of finances, insurance. You don't need to see me if you're okay with Vince following what I would do. And in my opinion, he's going to do it just as good as me. Because just because I'm a physical therapist and he's not, doesn't mean he can't coach a split squat like I can. It's the exact same. Now, I don't expect him to be doing cross friction, and he didn't, because he had a massage therapist do that, if it was even necessary. And we cheapened, not financially, but we cheapened the execution of the model with foam rollers and sticks and lacrosse balls, which is not as good as hands and other things, but they're better than zero. And then they would come back. And it's like, yeah, we can see you once a month. I'm like, now, would it be better if I was in his office, in his gym? No question. I would have had much more business, but that's just not what we were doing. Right. And, but yeah, I think it's a system, where everyone can apply. And as you know, I wasn't doing it in this case, but an allied health provider can own the profit margin on that process. Like, a chiro, a PT are allowed to hire a quote unquote trainer and charge $100 and pay the trainer $50 and you keep $50. The opposite can't happen in most states. There's probably a couple that you can't. Like, a trainer cannot hire a PT and charge the person $100 and give the PT $50. That's against the law in most states. I just don't know why this doesn't happen more outside of the risks involved in running a business. So, but if you apply this model, you no longer have to rely on, well, I don't, just do this at your gym. Like, no, why would you not? Obviously, unless the overhead and other reasons are.
Yeah, and it certainly allows you to leverage this activity out. I mean, I don't know how many young athletes Vince was working with at the time, but I would guess it would be greater than the number at the local PT clinic, because you can run it in a gym setting, and so it helps more people get more great work. So, well,
there's also a component that the whether it's a numbers game or not, just like the facilities that I had when I was in New Jersey, you'd walk in and be like, am I in the right place? Like, this is like, especially when you talk about the metropolitan area, I'm sure everywhere is probably more similar than different. But like, yeah, that looks like a physical therapy clinic to me. That looks like a gym. Like, if you're that person, which one do you want to go to? Well, I have, and Exos was the first to ever really kind of have no wall to what they did from therapy, even though it was kind of off to the side. Of course, you're going to put your tables in a sensible place. You're not going to put a table in the squat rack. But like, how many, I remember in New Jersey, we had two, UCS, which is, what at that time, if not now, is the biggest and baddest squat rack you could buy. And that's what, it's like, this is physical therapy on steroids, which probably shouldn't be said as, flip as it is, but that's the other thing. It
should probably happen more often than it does.
We got to talk about legal, ethical, morals again.
So just where everybody can kind of think of, I mean, when you went to physical therapy school or when you got out, and I would imagine you learned about ACL rehab in around that time, Was this still the era of leg extension machines and leg curl machines, and compare the relative quote unquote strength of one limb to the other, and make sure you had this degrees, and hey, that's good enough?
I think it probably was. I don't look, that was 99, so that's a long time. And
well, the sad news is it could have been 89, 79. Like, it just didn't progress much that I ever saw, like.
Yeah. I think at that time, the open chain was, it was definitely isokinetic land, which I don't think is the most horrible thing in the world, but it certainly cannot be the only metric for determining return to play, which I think at that time was. So like the
Myodex people, man, they must have mansions that were built in the 80s, and now a shack.
Yeah. Well, or they can, a PT that wasn't good enough to be a PT became a salesperson for these companies, and now they make believe continuing education seminars. So that's what they do now to have their mansion. Similar charlatan-like behavior.
Well, so I just want to dive into it, into some of these progressions and what you've learned along the way, because, and I might slow you down a little bit, because one thing about chiros, I think they have the skill set. Certainly, if they've done enough of the commercially available training, a lot of them have the skill set to take care of these people. But in school, we never learned like quote unquote protocol. But it's an interesting piece, because I don't know if that is an advantage, or perhaps it is an advantage to have never learned one and gone with one that is more supported by current research, rather than just what the last guy who taught me learned, that kind of idea.
Yeah. So, I would be very, look, you gotta be in the game at some point and feel good about making mistakes, and hopefully those mistakes do not have significant consequences. And I think it's probably fair that your rank and file chiro that even subscribes to more contemporary methods, it's just not, like a place that an acute injury outside of the spine. It's not. In my mind, it's not where the market thinks. So hopefully that's not out of line. And because of that, then that chiro doesn't get the repetitions to make mistakes.
Sure.
So but from a skill set, I mean, I think a chronic knee is something that the market probably is closer to thinking of a chiro as someone that can help them, or gets recommended more. But okay, so if a chiro has the skill set to handle a chronic knee issue, knee pain, etc., I mean, look, you want to go back to 2009. The special tests that an orthopedist uses are the same as what a physical therapist would use. I don't know why a chiro would do it any different. Like, I don't know. Now, I'm sure people that are still using, let's say, less than contemporary methods, they might have a reason why not to do that, and they can do what they do. That's okay. They're not bad people. They're just bad clinicians. But I agree. I don't know why that's not an option, for these acute surgeries. Because I'll be frank. I don't think of that many chiros that see rotator cuff repair. Now, they'll see them, month whatever, when it's not quite 100%.
Right.
Probably because the physical therapist did not engage in the proper manual therapy at the right times.
Yeah, I don't think we see a lot of fresh wounds, post-surgical wounds in that first 3 to 6 months. Now there may be some operating in some more, as you said, contemporary clinics where the model is blended a lot, or their brother-in-law is an orthopedic surgeon, so they may be capturing a market that's being thrust upon them at Thanksgiving. I can respect all that. But in the most part, I think that, you're not seeing the fresh wounds. But either way, I would love to dive down this path and kind of hear what you've learned over the years as a physical therapist who you worked in a hospital system, and you've also worked with the highest end of high-end athletes and been in the training rooms of professional settings and national level teams and whatnot, because that one thing that has surprised me along my path sometimes is how pervasive bad ideas are.
Yeah. Well, they don't know that they're bad, so it's and the standards are so different. I didn't say lower or higher; they're different. People have different standards. Well, I think the first piece to respond to that would be that, and this is not at all exclusive to an acute ACL repair reconstruction, something in month 3 or 4, or something 2 years later, or it can be any diagnosis. No one individual owns the process. There are certain members of the model that get called up to the front when the model's inherent evaluation system calls upon you. So if the model calls for surgery, the surgeon runs up front and he does his work, and then he probably should go away. Like, I'm not sure what their need is after. Well, they need to make sure the wound is healed. But after that, I'm not crystal clear as to why they're the ones. There,
because I do hear from a lot of my PT friends that work in, say, an outpatient clinic, that a lot of surgeons demand a certain protocol or want to influence the rehab protocol. Is that pretty true for all surgeries and all surgeons, or is that kind of specific to the ACL?
There's a couple different answers in there. Number one, let's start with the easiest. No, it's based on a surgeon. Like, you're dealing with a punk versus somebody who trusts somebody. Okay. Whether it's ego, whatever it is, who are you talking to? Like, Doc, how many ACLs have you rehabbed? Well, I did 230. No, I didn't ask how many surgeries you did. I'm asking you how many rehabs you did. So why do you? Now, there is a reality that in some surgeries, and not all, that if there's not something on a piece of paper that, and I don't care, because like those protocols or basically restrictions that like don't do this, because there's an unfavorable risk reward that something bad might happen. So ACL, you really do have some limitations on what you should be doing depending on the type of surgery for a few months. Now, the more you can elongate that, the better for a long-term prognosis, according to the current research. But the point is that you shouldn't be doing like, rotational cuts at 2 months of your surgery. Like, why? Well, because the vascularization of the ACL is not the innervation, blah, blah, blah. There's the reasons that, okay, you could blow it out again, because when the doc tests your knee, it's strong, and then it gets weaker and weaker and weaker, and then it gets strong again after a certain point. There are other surgeries that are far more precarious than that, meaning, some of our shoulder. If there's a repair, if there's something that stitches something, those are going to fall into a category where it is important to have some kind of recommendations or restrictions, and that's okay, because the doctors aren't the only ones that are developing that information. They're doing it with PTs that they trust, etc. So if you were to ask a very famous surgeon who works very closely with a famous physical therapist, they'll probably just say, "Oh yeah, like we just let Kevin do what he knows better than me," and that takes time to develop that relationship. Now, I'll have that relationship with certain folks, and the best, hands down, sports and orthopedic hospital in the world is Hospital Special Surgery. You don't work there if you have, most of these guys don't. Now, not all, but most of them. But they also look at me as a value to them, from a business standpoint. Even if it's just working with the clients. So there are times where I have to call the office and be like, Monica, can you send me over the protocol? Yeah, I know it's the same, but let me just have it on record just so I know. And I actually like to have the document so I can talk about it with the patient. Not because I necessarily need to know. But I will also tell you that it was specifically for the ACL, and I can send you this document. When you get an ACL protocol from Hospital Special Surgery, it's like recommendations. Like it clearly says, they're like, something to the effect that, look, everyone has different equipment, everyone progresses differently. Here's your hard rules, but everybody else, everything is really open ended. Where I remember being a young therapist and be like, oh my God, I don't have that. Like, what do I do? Or I think that's a really dumb exercise. How do I get around? And I just didn't do it, because if it didn't jeopardize the repair or the reconstruction, you're not you can do anything you want. We all get battered into our heads that we're all autonomous practitioners. So you don't have to listen to anybody. Now, when it comes to, these protocols and these restrictions post-surgically, you're probably, it's not worth it. Like, I don't know why. I've never felt like I wanted to do something because I'm conditioned that if I did this, the risk is too high. It doesn't, people come in and be like, hey, Charlie, I took my shirt off the hanger. Like, am I okay? I'm like, what do you think? It's a risk. It doesn't mean that every time you go past 90 degrees on your shoulder, it's going to fall off. But I have had people that pushed too much and had to get another. I'm like, well, it's not nothing to me. Like, I don't have anything to do with this. I haven't even seen the person. So those protocols are important. But now, hey, if you just get decompressed, meaning a cleanup, or they just shave some things down, and you just go to work. Like, there's no limitations. There's other than your own common sense. But basically, you can't hurt anything. You can be annoyed. You can then, continuing to train in pain or inflammatory situation, can lead to other issues. But there was nothing to F up from that surgery. So there is no, and they might still have protocols, but that one you just rip up. Like, and then I'll even be very, very comfortable saying that if it doesn't say it on the protocol to not do, meaning it's not even typed, that means you're allowed to do it. That's so
it sounds like the protocols are useful, at least to have a unified talking point to the patient, because they get handed that, and they look at it as, a lot of patients look at that as the word of God, right? And it must be respected. And I think that's a good point, just to discuss those aspects. So
yeah.
So before I got on the ego trip about the protocols, we were talking about the surgeon moves to the front of the line when necessary, and then the physical therapist moves to the front of the line when that's the required skill set.
Yeah. Well, I think when it comes after the surgical process, I think the names of the people becomes a little more murky. We just talked for a period of time of the value of a chiro, where, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but physical therapy falls under the domain, and physical therapists can squawk all they want, but like, it doesn't matter. Like, call it whatever you want.
We don't have the license, but we have a lot of us have the skill set.
Yeah. But you're allowed to do it. Like, meaning words are only thing that's protected by law. Most states, a chiro can advertise that they can provide physical therapy. They may not be able to say they're a physical therapist, but you can bill and provide some. I've seen this, whereas I cannot. In some states, I am not allowed to say that I'm going to manipulate your spine. I am allowed to say I'm going to provide a high velocity, low amplitude thrust or a grade 5 mobilization, which looks strikingly similar to what a chiro would call manipulation. Mm-hmm. Or I'm allowed to say I'm going to crack your neck, which most chiro would probably be offended by. So it's a silly. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the surgical process, there's a degree of education that is required to practice to suck at surgery. So if you don't ever have the opportunity, so you see, the education does drive this process, but the reality is, if I go to some third world country and learn how to do it, I don't, it's wrong. It's probably not safe, but I'm not sure that person is automatically not as good as somebody else. Like, I don't believe that. I don't want to believe it. So now, after the surgical process, if you got the skills to pay the bills, that's what it is. And everybody does have the environment. We both know people that are neither chiro or physical therapist, but for a particular area, they are the best person for the technique. Because, and again, I might be responsible for some of this, and I'm disappointed if it's true. but there's tons of seminars that non-healthcare providers can take and become a very, very bad therapist in 2 days. Okay. So they get a chance to start to practice these things because it's not speeding until you get caught. And then you got these jackbags that'll say, oh yeah, no, trainers can come to our manual therapy course, but they're not going to be certified. And we expect them to practice under their, what do you think you're talking about? Like, do you think that a trainer who's spending, $12.95 to go to a manual therapy seminar, is not going to practice these techniques with people?
Flew there, paid for the hotel room. They're in the seminar. You think they're going to walk out in these moments of treatment?
Come on. It's and then of course the individuals that teach those seminars like to laugh, and what they say at dinner is a little bit different than what they say during the seminar. Trust me on that. So the ethics is a little bit different than what I would prefer.
Hey, you might hear me talk about our app, and I want to introduce you to the company who built our app, and that is Membrant. Membrant does nothing but design custom apps for small business owners like yourself. So how powerful is this? Well, if you had a custom app, you can deliver information to the phone of your patients in a way that helps them stay connected to you and your brand. So it could be videos, recipes, advice, articles, and these aren't ones that are on YouTube for everybody to see. These are dialed in specific to people that are on your list. Now, you could use this for marketing. You could also use this for patient care, and people could access certain exercises that are designed specifically for them and their case within the app that has your company's logo, your branding, and everything about it on there. So if you're interested, go ahead and check out Membrant.com. That's Membrant with a D, like Rembrandt, Membrant.com, or check it out in the show notes, and we should have a link there. If you have any questions, hit me up, because I think they're doing an amazing thing, and it's one more way to provide better care and make a little bit more money while giving your patients what they want, which is that information and access to you. Thanks a lot. Let's turn this towards a positive. So you said there is no one person that owns the domain, and I think that was your first point. You know, having that skill set and whatnot. What is kind of the next major advancement you had made when you were really learning how to go about these ACL rehab?
The similar that no one person owns the process. To simplify any rehabilitation of an injury, an orthopedic injury, we would use the same rules as if it wasn't a surgery. Like what would be your standards to do an exercise? You can, you have the good form, which requires a number of different things, and it doesn't hurt, because you could have good form and it still hurt. Those are the two things. They mean a lot of things, but basically make it simple as possible. So does your knee hurt when you do bench press? No. So you're allowed to do bench press. Well, it kind of hurts when I bend it. Okay, so do a floor press. Well, I didn't know we're allowed to do that. Yeah, well, you can. So that all bundles into the concept that by training the entire body as aggressively as you would under any other circumstance, provided it doesn't hurt and provided that it's good form, and with the surgery, we'll probably add, there can't be any reverb. And I make that up. Like reverb, sometimes by creating lots of tension, you'll feel it somewhere else, which is unacceptable. So you got to dial it down. So you might not be able to bring your A+ intensity if your knee hurts or if your shoulder hurts. But the bottom line is that the normal training process, as aggressively as possible but no more, establishes a humoral and hormonal profile that allows things to hurt less because you become less sensitive as your nervous system normalizes, and you heal faster. Like training improves hormonal profile. Training improves T-cell abundance. Training improves a heart that is consistent with the activities of your next activity. Training improves oxidative function of all type 1 and type 2. If you put those four things into every recipe, you start to look like a magician. Now, you can't go any faster with these protocols. That's inappropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But what you can do is expose the body to as much stress as possible so that when you do reach the next benchmark, boom, like that you're going even faster. So for instance, if you train with a fracture on your forearm and it's got a cast, and you train the rest of your body, the reality is if you cut the damn cast off, your bone will be healed faster than six weeks. It will, and it's been proven. But we're not advocating that. We're advocating so that when the cast does come off and you're medically cleared, you're closer to a more proper return to activity, and you'll be able to do more, which will get you closer to your end game. So the concept that I just wasn't again, it's become my calling card to a degree, but the humoral and hormonal factors that are improved from a training process allows the healing process to be accelerated. Then again, that doesn't mean you accelerate through the protocol, but you're trying to expose the body to as much ideal stress as possible. And when it wins, your body doesn't know, like if you improve these XYZs, it doesn't just go to your knee, it doesn't just go to your chest. Like, I had a call a couple weeks ago. I would rather a young athlete go to the gym and bench press than go to some flunky physical therapist where some high school kid is pulling the pin on a leg press while their knee hurts. Now, that's a very sensational commentary, but I think at least you're not hurting their knee, and I'm also suggesting that they're going to be doing other things along with this bench press. But that would be the second concept, that you train the whole body.
With that, if I can just piggyback a question, how important, and did you change your stance? Did you realize it? Did this change at all? How important is high intensity conditioning, high intensity cardiovascular exercise, whatever you were going to say that in that process? So, you have that individual go to the gym, do the bench press, do pull-ups. Did you also come to the realization, or did you lower the value of a specific cardiovascular? I know you talked about interval training, so I'm going to guess you went there, but whatever you.
Well, the interval is not the way I would describe it, because you can do intervals in a lot of different ways. High intensity, where your heart rate is in a period above 85%. I describe that as
it magically intervalizes itself, right?
Yeah, you have no choice.
Yeah.
But I would consider that concentric heart work training versus eccentric. So they're both very important. Where the concentric, your heart rate gets so high, so the reason for being there is so that you can punch hard. But because the heart rate is going so fast, you don't get a chance to fill up the heart, which is more, when I say concentric and eccentric, I'm talking about the left ventricle. So because during a rehabilitation process, you're already taxed for your biological resources, I would actually skew more towards eccentric heart work, which is going to be below 85%, where you're primarily using oxygen. Whereas it's not so much that you're using oxygen, it's that you're not building acidosis, which the body is already suffering from pain and inflammation, etc. So if you choose training strategies that add acidosis when you don't have to, now you're probably barking up the wrong tree. So it's not this, just train and everything's fine. There's some scales here of just like if someone was, to me, injury is a form of under recovery. So if you are under recovered, adding more training methods and protocols that have high cost, high reward are probably not that efficient during that period of time. Now, for those that are aware, there's, heavy bench press is going to build up acidosis. It is not like you do require mild to moderate levels of acidosis and hypoxia in order to create some changes. And if you're doing it away from the surgical area, then this shouldn't be a problem. But when you talk about using your whole body for conditioning or cardio or whatever that word that clicks, I would steer very, very clear from high intense intervals where intensity is 100%. And even in longer intervals, and there's always an end around. Like when you know the rules, you break the rules, and when you understand physiology, if you really do feel it's necessary to throw ropes, 100%, I don't know too many humans that can throw ropes 100% longer than 7 to 8 seconds. And when and then when people find that to be strange, they would actually find it strange to actually do something 100%. Like no one know. Most people don't even know what 100% intensity is. So I think that's what you're alluding to. And if we look at training methods that have high cost, we have to bounce that off against what the body is asking for at the moment. So it doesn't mean you don't train hard. It just means you match things to what the body is asking for.
Part of the reason I'm asking that is going back to this population we're speaking of that like Vince Gabriel worked with, the adolescent. A lot of times they have never gotten very intense with weight training or any sort of anything in the gym. And yet they can run for days. They can sprint a hill, but it's moving weight. They kind of look like olive oil sometimes. For those who remember the Popeye cartoons. So
I got that. I do what you mean.
Well, I know you're of that age, but for those listening, and so I just wonder if that gives them a window of finding the top gear.
Absolutely,
in any sense.
The frank improvement of contractile force simply creates a more efficient, human model. So when if for the same amount of effort, your muscle can create more force, and there's a motor strategy that's efficient with that, well, then you're going to deload other systems of the body, both physiologically and orthopedically. So I think that the biggest understanding is and maybe here's an example. When Ben Johnson, and I don't care about steroids, every single guy in that race in 1988 was either has been pegged or is lying. Ben Johnson finished his last 6 weeks of training for Seoul with bench press only, because he didn't want, him and Charlie Francis didn't really feel that the soreness, that the type of leg training that he was. So why did they do it? Well, because bench press kept his hormonal profile, albeit supplemented from other things, kept it as maximized as possible. So now that's a unique example because sprinting itself is a modality, is an exercise, it's training. But it's not like when you bench press, you're not using your whole body. Yes, you're using your chest and your shoulders, but the compensation that makes your chest and shoulders bigger and stronger, that is not exclusive to this one little area. Like it's pronounced there, but why would you have little girls do pull-ups, when they have a sprained ankle? Hey, you know what? Little girls that can nail pull-ups don't hurt their ankles, and that's in a journal that I am an editor of. It's called the Journal of Common Sense, and there's no reason not to, because going back to what we talked about a little while ago, this is like their chance. Like, why wouldn't you expose them to these things? And because that's something that I use a lot. Okay, so in theory, if you sprain your ankle or hurt your knee, there's something at your pelvis. There's a glute medius problem. Well, if you strengthen the lats, the lats engage to the lumbar, thoracolumbar fascia, which with proper tension can then allow for a posterior tilt and put the glute medius in a more, blah, 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 blah. So, no, that again, that's being sensational, but it's actually true. So, I don't, the humeral, if you know how to train for humeral and hormonal factors, which are more macro qualities, instead of I'm training to bench press just so my chest gets stronger or bigger, which is a secondary or tertiary quality, that's a whole nother topic. But the bottom line is people heal faster when they have those four qualities, which is bucketed as hormonal profile, T cells, an activity-specific heart, and oxidative function of all type 1 and type 2 fibers. That's why you train hard when you have surgery.
All right. I'm rethinking these buckets, and as this applies to low back pain actually is where my mind is going. Like, how would you do this differently? But we're talking ACL. So going back to the ACL, you've shared these 2 tips. What's the third one? What's the third area where you've changed or your process?
Yeah.
And by the way, before we go on, I just want to make sure everybody knows the coursework. Where can they find the coursework if they're like, I love what this guy's saying, I see ACLs all the time, I want to buy it?
Oh, charlieweingroff.com. And I'm pretty sure after that you should be able to find it. But
right.
we have all of my the stuff that I've produced. There's a couple other things out there that other people produced that I was a part of. Is all on a streaming platform. It's called T=R Plus, and very creative, right? And it's all right there. So all the Training Equals Rehab products are there. Training Equals Rehab kettlebells, and those are all like on demand. There's a level below that we have accumulated every article, every vlog, and I'm pretty sure every podcast that I've ever done, and it's all for free. So it might be interesting sometimes to go back to the stuff that I wrote in 2010. I'm like, hey, like that's actually still what I say. Oh, I would say right now. You well know that there's a little less bite in my speaking style as there was back then. But a zebra doesn't change its stripes. So that's charlieweingroff.com. T=R Plus is where you can get ACL in action.
Okay, great.
Now the third piece that you're asking about is this return to play concept, and it's actually nothing to do with, or very little to do with the rehab process or the testing process to actually return to play. It's running those metrics when you're healthy, and whether it's wearables or how many gym owners literally write down the weights that the person used every single time. Like, so if you're looking to see if a person is at whatever arbitrary percentage of what they used to be, well, first of all, I think they should be 105% because 100% got them hurt, or as part of the context that got them hurt. Certainly, you step in a ditch, there isn't a whole lot, that kind of bets are off a little bit. But whether it's, when we look at using even just heart rate, if someone is your athlete and they're doing great and they step in a ditch, and then we're now 12 months later and they're going, you know what you did with them a year ago, so you're going to look at metrics and see, well, hey, when we did this conditioning test, they covered the same amount of ground and they have no pain, so that's good. But his heart rate is 17 beats higher, and it took an extra, 32 seconds for it to get down to 60%. That person is not ready to return. Or if they are ready to return, it's not 100%. So like that's the other thing, so it's not about like if you return. There's people that could play in a game and they just need to be like doing ice hockey shifts instead of playing, 9 minutes and 23 seconds before their ACL gives out or their Achilles gives out. I dropped the line. But appreciating, if you're at higher levels, and I think because of its convention in American football, in global football and soccer, wearing GPS at the lower level, at the youth levels, is not so weird anymore. Now, whether they're valid and reliable is a whole other story. But how hard did you have to work to accomplish the same thing? And you can now have some kind of metric that can tell you that, where you might look great and you're hitting all your cuts and your force is awesome, but physiologically you're spending much more. So what that tells us is that you're going to cross over that 85% magical line into, I don't call it this, but lactic environment, which is high cost, and you basically need to make them more fit, not necessarily more strong, not necessarily more dynamically stabilized. They need to be more fit. Because if you're going to get exposed to acidosis and hypoxia sooner than you feel you're supposed to, you have now engaged in an entire cascade that it doesn't explain injury limitation, but it explains injuries. Where, like, how did this happen out of nowhere? Well, one thing that you're not looking at is humoral and hormonal factors. And if the entire rehabilitation process does not have a significant focus on conditioning and having as maximal output for these cheaper energy systems, well, then that in my mind, that's why people are not coming back. So when we look at return to play, like, how do you even know? Like, what did they do before? You don't know. And that's a very challenging thing because,
Yeah.
a lot of times these kids are engaging in rehab and they never trained before. And I think my opinion is that's where this 2-year thing is coming from, where research, or commentaries, I'm not sure, the level of research that these things, where a lot of folks are talking about you should be out for 2 years. And we do have some anecdotal, following pro sports. Okay, yeah, they're not really who they are until 2 years. Well, maybe it's because your rehab is trash, because other people do come back at a very impressive level. So I don't know that there's a clear answer, but that third piece would be using technology and very, very precise before and after. Because if you're only going to look at after, like, that may not be what that person was before. So that
we're using the term return. We're using the term return, but inherently, like, that would almost necessitate prior knowledge of their levels.
That's
right?
exactly right. That's exactly right. And instead, we're using these norms.
Yeah, we're guesstimates
in my mind.
Return.
Yeah, in my mind, they don't apply. So now, what would I do? Like, let's say I'm handling someone and I don't know these metrics. We're going to train the holy hell out of them and be like, okay, for a 305-pound defensive lineman, this is good. This is pretty good. But you don't know what pretty good is for a 14-year-old kid. Like there's no standards. You don't kind of know. You don't have any idea. So that would be something. And it's like just a heart rate monitor. Like if you run a mile, you can run a mile in 6 minutes and have an average heart rate of 140. And you can also run a mile in 6 minutes and have an average heart rate of 160. Those are two incredibly different environments. One of which you are paying much more to cross the finish line in the same amount of time. It's like gas mileage.
Yeah.
It's you got there, and your knee didn't hurt. But that means something, and that was something we just talked about it on the DVD. Like, there was no demonstration of anything because it would be very specific to individuals. Mm-hmm. But I've heard lots of situations where it's like, dude, he looks great. Like, he's awesome. I'm like, dude, if you look, because it was the same coaching staff, so they're running the same drills, and because there are metrics at the professional sports level, you're like, look, like, he's trash. Like, he's. I don't care if
he's getting by on, basically in golf we'd say you're getting by on course knowledge. Like, where
he's paying. Yeah, he's paying for that. Mm-hmm. Where course knowledge would mitigate the cost, mm-hmm. But so he knows the drill, but he still has to go sideline to sideline. And these, if you believe in certain metrics, they can give you an appreciation of how hard you have to work in order to make the play. And that is a significant piece that is not being talked about. And that also is buddied with a little bit of a bite. I don't see that there's significant legitimate research on return to play from non-healthcare providers. So you're allowed to have a PhD and be a strength coach and run this type of research. But we don't see too much. Most of the research that we see in return to play is from physical therapists and orthopedic surgeons that did the surgery, who are probably not doing much of anything during the sample collection. And So if a physical therapist, they're only going to do what's in their lens. So there's certainly high value to hopping and the different types of things that we see. But I'd like to see other things that are probably not maximal load, but maybe more maximal physiology.
Interesting. This is great. So Charlie, along with what you've just talked about, what's the most exciting change that you've seen in the industry? Because you're, as we spoke of, you're tip of the spear. You're out there looking and always trying to find new things. What's the most exciting ability in the last 2 years that you've gained? I mean, is it the wearable technologies? Is it the proliferation of GPS? Is it some ability to measure something, or I'm trying to think. I mean, we've been putting hands on people for millennia, so
Well, I think
therapy
if we're looking at these measurables, I don't know that any of them are new. Of course, technology makes things different levels of efficiency, but where we can attach beliefs to what those measurables mean and then act upon them. So whether that belief is grounded in your heuristic or it's grounded in a piece of paper that somebody else wrote 2 years ago that just got published in your favorite journal, whatever you believe, now we can look at some of these technologies and be like, that should help me make my next decision. Just like if you put your hands on somebody, you now believe that if you do this, this other thing will happen. Or if you see someone's knee buckle in, you do this because you believe this next thing is going to happen. So now there's another layer of things that we can't necessarily see or touch that can help us make a next decision. And just like when you put your hands on somebody or see their knee buckle in, everything is a blinking yellow light. You are allowed to let your knee buckle in. We have seen many, many people squat and jump with a significant amount of weight and jump very, very high with their knees buckling in. It's a risk. So that nothing's ever red light, green light. And that's not an indemnification for people to be bad coaches and therapists. It's the truth. So the technology, just like what I just said with, kind of getting a palpation, or looking at mechanics, you're not obliged to do something. There might be a reason why you don't want to. From a number, it's the same thing with the technology. So it's not. Nothing is ever red light, green light. Everything is blinking yellow, and it's about your decision to act on it. Now, that begins with the belief of, okay, like I believe very much that if you've got 6 wheels on your back, your knee buckling in is a bad thing. But if you're in the middle of a game and you land on one leg, your knee buckles, and all of a sudden guys dove by you because they were faked out, well, maybe it's not such a bad idea. So it gives you something to believe in, and everybody's got to believe in something.
And last question for you. Let's say that there's somebody listening out there that's graduating. They're still in school. They're going to graduate. They're less than 1 year from graduation. What's one tip you could give them so they could have a career that may come to a point where they're getting paid $14,000 an hour for services?
I got to find that dude.
Yeah.
I'll work for him and make 7. Most of the time that question is phrased with somebody that's, challenged by they're exposed to more contemporary models, and the schooling is not always there. So, the more canned answer is like, dude, just pass the damn test and we'll worry about it then. I don't think that's the question. So I got to come up with something better than that. Find a, obviously pass the test, and find a work environment that allows you to make mistakes, so that you can feel really good about, the cliche of, oh my God, I can't believe that I did that 5 years ago. Because people could say whatever, like about what, my story, but that's the truth. I could go even like last year, maybe there's something that and it may not always be clinical, but if you can make mistakes and not have this incredible price to pay, you got to pay something. But the only way to get better is by making mistakes. And you could have the biggest, baddest ego you want, and you could think you know everything. Just deep down, you're allowed to make mistakes, because the only way you're ever gonna get better is by making a mistake. Otherwise, you're only gonna be that good. If you think you're that good right now, then you deserve 14 grand an hour.
Yeah. It breaks my heart when I talk with people and, we'll run into them 5 years later on the road, and just they'll talk about something that's eerily similar to what they talked about 5 years previous and that they were teaching 5 years before that. And I'm like, we're still doing this? Anyways. Yeah.
Well,
I mean, I remember reading, Google found that the number one factor in innovation was trust of your coworkers, trust that they're not going to just bag you when they get the chance. And that trust might mean, hey, we know you screwed up, but we're still here for you. Like, we'll support you any way we can. So
yeah, there's with Canada basketball, we have it's just a one slide, but it's so this is kind of like my role, and we have systems and processes, clinical, which is a lot of what we're talking about. There's my Canadian accent. Then there's data analysis, which is another piece, and then there's social systems and processes, which if that young clinician, and I'll be happy to send you the slide. It's nothing proprietary because it's all a good slide doesn't have a lot on it. If they could find situations where they can make those mistakes, but they're safe enough, and safety is one of our four core values of social systems and processes. You'll be nice. Like, you'll be good. Find safe. Like, hey, what would you use the word safe to describe that situation? Well, I don't think anybody's gonna punch me. No. Is it safe? Like it means a lot. It's like, can you say whatever you want as long as you're not using bad language or and not be in fear that you're going to be reprimanded or lose your job or lose an opportunity. Safety is the first one, and search for safety. Like that's a maybe one way to start this process.
All right. Well, Charlie, it's always a pleasure to talk with you. I feel like it always goes long because you're such a well of incredible information, and I know it's peppered with mistakes of which you have vowed to never make again. And so done your best to.
I own them though. I own them, and I'm glad I can look in the mirror and be like, yeah, I did that, and I won't do it again. I was wrong. Yeah. I was wrong.
That's why you got the goatee, right? Just cover up all the shots you've taken to the chin and moved on.
I was just too lazy to shave it off this time.
Oh, okay. Nice. All right. Well, once again, can you share where people can find your information if they're interested and they like what they're hearing?
Yep. CharlieWeingroff.com. And there's 2 layers, aside from other things, there's 2 layers to that site. One is totally free, so you can troll around and everything's there. There might be some podcasts with you as long as we found them on the internet. And then all of the products are available at T=R+. Eventually there will be a 3rd level of the site that'll be a little bit different than those 2, but CharlieWeingroff.com and CH Weingroff on Instagram, and CWagon75 on Twitter. So that's
I said in the Twittersville.
Yeah. So I use Twitter more than other people. I like Twitter. It's easy. I don't have to take a picture.
I have ceased with that. It just seems to I don't know. I worry about some of the people commenting on there that what else is going on in your life? Do you need a hug? Do you need an intervention? What's going on?
Oh yeah, that no. I use social media for my very pointed purposes. I'll tell somebody that's close to me, something happened. I'm like, oh, I didn't know. I'm like, yeah, because I only put on social media what I feel like putting on there.
Mhm.
It's not. This is not an open book to my life. You're gonna know what I choose that you know.
There you go.
So,
All right.
all right, man.
Well, I appreciate the time. And on behalf of Charlie Weingroff, this is Josh Satterlee saying go out there, maximize your license, and live the life you dream of. Thanks, Chuck.
You got it, man.
Thanks so much for checking out these videos. I hope they're useful. We'll cover things like rehab, exercise, business model, progressions, layout, everything else that helps you build a clinic. So if you're interested, you can click here, there, here, or anywhere to get more videos just like this. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you soon.